Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. And I'm smiling a little because the topic given is the power to make useful decisions, which might be contrasted with making useless. Sorry, I will pull myself together here. So let's start with a reflection. Sorry. Raj Yoga always feels like more than just meditation. There's such a sense of purpose, engagement, attention connected to Raj Yoga. And I sit here with that feeling now, very focused, very interested, very purposeful and deliberate with my attention. Very often it might feel like my energy, my attention is pulled in many different directions, that there is not that sense of yoga or union inside. My mind is pulling me in one direction, my desires in another direction, expectations from others or customs and systems somewhere else, past conditioning, so many different tensions and forces being exerted on me, the soul. And sitting here quietly as a yogi, I allow myself to move into a quiet place, a place of sanctuary that's free from all these tensions, almost a place of amnesty. A place that's so quiet, I start to experience clarity, really listen to one voice, the voice of the authentic self, the voice of inner wisdom. When it's very quiet inside, I can hear that voice. It's the voice the soul uses to commune with God. It's the voice of self-trust. So much of Raj Yoga is about developing the art of listening to that authentic voice of the self. The silence is not empty, but it's the place where the sound of truth becomes very clear. Om Shanti.
Shanti, good evening. So, welcome to the Raj Yogi. I can't help but ask, what's so funny about useful decisions?
Nothing, nothing. I just suddenly useless decisions came into mind.
It's
But it's
good though.
good.
It's a good question because
Mhm.
I mean, there's everything out there saying, "How do I learn to study effectively?" versus
Right,
no one's gonna sit here and talk about how do I study ineffectually, which we do.
right, right.
But it's interesting because I think it comes up a lot. It came up in the last two sessions because the topic was really about being able to discern.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that question that comes up, but is that the same as intuition? Some
Mm-hmm.
have really good intuition, is what they feel.
Mm,
It's not being able to know what's driving it. So,
mm,
decisions as well.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so much at every moment where, the words choices and decisions are very closely connected. And at every moment, even now, sitting here engaged in the conversation or listening, you made the choice, you made a decision to spend this moment of time in this way. So we're constantly being asked to make decisions. And I think the word that we often use more is this idea of benevolent, what is a beneficial choice or decision. Um, that's obviously where we want to get to, is where we're making benevolent choices. What will, and I don't mean that in a self indulgent or self serving way, because a benevolent decision will always benefit everyone and also matter. So it's a win win, making win win kind of choices where I benefit, and therefore it sort of creates a ripple of benevolence for others as well. We want to learn to make those kinds of choices. Absolutely.
What is the relationship then in terms of benevolent decisions, useful
Mm-hmm.
decisions, and my sense of identity, the real me? So,
Mm-hmm.
this aspect of Raj Yoga again.
Yeah, it's been very nice this month, which is a month we really dedicate to focusing on the first student of Raj Yoga, Brahma Baba. And the reason we do isn't to worship that soul, but we recognize that soul was successful, very successful in the study of Raj Yoga. And rather than recreating the wheel, why not be inspired by that success? So we say, follow in his footsteps. And it's been very nice. What I've enjoyed so much is that it becomes very clear of his relationship with truth, and that this was the foundation of everything. I would say this is the most worthwhile use of one's time. The best decision one can make is to really, really be able to experience truth. And the deepest form of truth is the true self. So if I am not aligned with my true self, if I'm still aligned with the image, then I can see how that would affect my choices, my decision making is all going to be about sustaining the image. And that definitely is not benevolent. That's about sustaining ego and attachments and fears, etc. Versus when I'm in the position of, we say, truth or a true sense of self, then my choices will be aligned with truth rather than with ego and desires, etc. And where there's truth, of course, there is benefit.
Certainly, it's not about a point of convincing, but when you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about filling the image, there, I'm sure many have heard of that famous slogan from Sprite. Image is everything, thirst is nothing. You ever
I
heard of
had
that?
never heard of that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thirst
Maybe
is
I'm the
nothing,
wrong
image is everything.
generation.
I don't remember, maybe it was
Okay.
10 years ago, but
Okay.
it certainly was within the time when I've taken Raja Yoga. So when I saw that slogan after coming into the study, I was like, wow, that's actually a pretty damaging slogan, but we don't think about it.
Mm.
But in terms of the context of what we're talking about, for many, image is everything. And they'll even
Mm-hmm.
say, what's wrong with feeding my image.
Hmm. I think it's really understandable. We're talking about choices or decisions, and what we sometimes lack is options. And so we throw ourselves into the options available. And if, we're contrasting here a sense of self, which is image, versus a sense of self with its truth. And for many, they're not even, it's not even clear if there's a difference between the two. But I think if we look at world circumstances and see the state of the world, we can sort of conclude that something's off. That I don't know if we're really comfortable with the level of violence and deception and corruption and fear that is existing now in the world. And that's based on ourselves, not something out there, but our own nature. So, this living through image has led to that kind of world. So, that alone is giving us feedback that maybe I have to see if there's another option. But if there's a lack of options, it's totally understandable that I would throw myself into. So, again, we come back to Brahma Baba. Very interesting. So, even in the face of not being sure what the other option was, he really felt, I can't live as an image anymore. I'm not quite sure what else is available, but I can't live that way. And that's a very courageous step to take, to walk into the unfamiliar, which it turned out was very familiar. So we say remembering is the essence of the study. But of course, souls will do what feels familiar and what seems to be the only option. But when you walk, when you begin to say, okay, I'm a soul, this is starting to give us another option. And I think the most important decision to make in coming to something like Raj Yoga, which is endeavoring to explore the truth, is that to make the decision, I will hold out for a truthful experience. So, do I recognize, like in my heart, does it really feel that, yes, that's, I recognize that's right, that feels true. I am a soul. Like always give yourself time, make the decision that I am going to hold out for very truthful experiences in the study, because the whole point of it is to be truthful, to explore another option and not to fake it. And I know that sometimes out of desperation, try to fake it. It appears that those around us are having very deep experiences. But again, we're back to Brahma Baba, who had the courage to say, no, I will. I don't care if I look stupid or slow, but I'm going to wait, make sure I'm having a very truthful experience. It's the whole point. I didn't come here to do the same of what I was doing before.
It's interesting in terms of this aspect of benevolent decisions,
Mm,
useful decisions. It also is coming to mind in terms of it doesn't matter if it's a large organization, small organization, what we consider to be useful. And you probably heard of that phrase project versus people or
mhm,
project over people. That in that perspective, it seems like it's a useful
mm.
decision.
Yeah, again, it's back to what am I feeding? If I am feeding ego or desire, all of this is under image, then it's totally understandable that project would feel um, more important. So it's coming always back to the seed of what position am I in? I, the decision maker, rather than just focusing on the decisions, but looking at the state of the decision maker, because that will deeply affect how I go about decision making.
So it sounds like it's more of a far-sighted, maybe not even something one is thinking about, trying to make a far-sighted decision, but when you know the truth of who you are, you have the power, courage to honor that. There does seem to be some, I guess you can say, far-sighted ramifications versus doing something that might seem to have a nice short-term gain, but
Hmm.
you're not really thinking about that at that time.
I was just remembering there was an initiative that was introduced quite a few years ago now, well over a decade, just a minute. And part of that initiative was to have minute long interviews with people in different walks of life with different expertise. And the one interview that really stays with me was someone in the military and in quite a high ranking position. And he was sharing his experience of taking just a minute to reflect. And he actually shared that he sort of found him, it was very important for him to take just a minute before making a decision because the decisions he made affects hundreds of lives as a military leader. So it was very important for him to, use that time. It's very interesting. With just a minute, probably 59 seconds of that minute isn't spent on the decision. 59 seconds of that minute is spent on the state of the self. And then 1 second is all that's needed for the decision. So back to, am I in a true, because when we say I'm a soul, I think it's really important. We, in the Course, we say, yes, you're a point of light, you're eternal. But what we're really trying to get to is the capacities of the soul. This is the idea of the soul is a child of the Supreme Soul, so has very benevolent capacities as its true nature. So I want to be in that alignment so that I have those benevolent, those spiritual capacities activated and available in decision making. Very peaceful, very patient, very mature when I'm in soul consciousness. And so that will be so I want to take the time to get into that headspace. And the decision's very easy. It's been said that when one is very connected to their core values, decision making is easy. But if one is instead being pulled by desires, attachments, pressure, expectations, then it's a very anxiety ridden experience making a decision. And I'll ask a lot of people. And so soul consciousness immediately aligns me with my values.
So is it, I don't even know if the word is journey or spectrum, but some souls would share, and it happens even in day-to-day life. I know smoking, this is a really, very obvious example. I know smoking is bad for me, but I can't seem to, decide that I will just stop smoking. I mean, that's a very, very overt example.
Well, it's interesting. I might decide I want to stop smoking, but not have the power to do it. And so then my next decision, rather than beating myself up, or I think this was actually my focus today, nonviolence, is my next decision is how can I support or equip myself to honor that choice. So it's, again, that's again a very soul conscious decision to make because that would suggest you have faith in the self, which is part of soul consciousness. So,
Well, a part of this discussion about long-term ramifications, I was thinking about, for some may not have taken the course.
mhm,
So this aspect of law of karma, we
yeah.
share about spiritual laws that are existing, but really in terms of, I was actually thinking about abiding conscience when you make decisions that don't honor yourself. It certainly has a lot to do with then, these long-term consequences.
Mhm,
But back to again, if I don't really know my sense of self, perhaps maybe we're not really thinking about those things. Of course, understandably, if you're a part of an organization and you're having to make decisions that it's going to affect, the budget, that's going to affect the number of people who are working, but some of these
mhm,
subtleties are not really, I guess, in one's awareness. Even if you've taken Raja
mhm.
Yoga or not, it's so easy to, I guess, see things on a very visible level.
Yeah, I'm going to get very nerdy now. I hope you will just. and to allow me to go there. So we're yes, we're going to go to Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I remember this was before even coming into this study. I was very touched. I felt that the leader, Captain Picard, had many very noble qualities as a leader. And I also was intrigued by the team, and I felt the team actually represented, in some ways, different aspects of the soul. One was, it was like, would make it happen, that capacity in the soul to just make things happen. We call it will, and it's almost used interchangeably with spirit. Um, and then there was the healer, and then there was the logical. There were different aspects of the soul, and it was very touching that on his team there was a spiritual resource. And this, I remember seeing this well before coming to Baba. And I've always, any company I've been with, I've always said, I don't know why companies don't have a spiritual resource. It's absolutely mad, absolutely insane, given the law of karma. Because there's times I see them making decisions like, oh, you have no idea what you're doing. There's that deep feeling of just not, really taking into account spiritual or karmic laws. So this idea that there was a spiritual resource, or she came from a race that was telepathic and very sensitive to subtleties, and and she was given equal value on the team. And I always, whenever the captain would sort of be with the team and checking in, okay, what each one thought, and he would also ask this one what, and I always thought I was positive other people watching would say, why is he even asking her? She gives the most fluffy responses, but he would be very serious and listen to her and just she'd say, "Well, I feel that if you do this, then this it will set this in motion." And he'd go, "Okay, and I'm sure people were saying that is the fluffiest, most ungrounded thing I've ever heard. And I was like, that was great. That was such a useful piece of information to take into account rather than just the surface or overt things, or even, well, this worked in the past, it should, all of this stuff isn't really getting into the nitty gritty of decision making that ultimately, yeah, it's these spiritual laws that are running the show. So we have to have that kind of sensitivity. I have to work with the physical, the practical, absolutely, with different systems and, laws of the land and all of this. But I never want, spirituality is based on the divinity of the soul. And, and it's really designed to lead us towards peace and happiness. So it allows us to make decisions and choices that will get us to that outcome. If I'm taking it into account, it's almost like playing a chess game sometimes. And I know with the daddies, the Brahma Kumaris is a very unusual organization because it uses spirituality in its decision making quite overtly. And I don't know how many times with the daddies have shared or we've even witnessed that if there's a major decision, they will actually go into silence. And with a completely blank slate, they're not going in there to just kind of fight it out logically. They literally are surrendering it to the silence, to God. And it's a very pure, pure place they're going into. They are using purity to drive the decision. And if purity drives the decision, it will always be benevolent. Purity is where I have no desires. Purity is where there's so much peace and patience. Purity is where I have complete self respect and respect for others. Purity is where I'm very, very light, free, detached. So it's a very pure, pure place. I have no hidden agendas or personal intentions. Very, very, only a contented soul can really operate from that space. And so, but decisions made in that place, from in terms of law of karma, very far-sighted. But many would say, looking at them, why are you making that decision? That makes absolutely no sense in the short term. It's like, wait, you know. weight. And it's amazing the farsightedness of the organization in terms of the decisions they've made. It's just remarkable to use purity as your compass in decision making.
You're sharing, and to be in that state where there are no desires, and you had already shared, that would mean how content one would have to be.
Mm,
It feels like it would be so freeing in itself. Forget
yeah.
about the decision, but freeing itself to be able to make a decision where you actually have no desires of what the outcome is, which
Hmm.
is quite interesting. Even the impact of that.
Hmm. It's actually very connected to a state that we call karma yogi. So, this is why, again, as we began, every moment I'm making decisions, every moment in my life, I am deciding. Again, I don't think of time as minutes or seconds, I think of time as choices. Every moment I'm making a choice. And so, as a karma yogi, what that state is that the soul, I'm in the experience of being a soul, because that's actually the only way I can have a meaningful connection with the Supreme Soul and receive from that being. That's very critical. Because now the reason I'm so content is because I'm getting everything I need from the Supreme Soul. Not from outcomes, not from people, but from the Supreme Soul. In that very free, content state, I am in the most powerful decision making state I can be, because I'm not wanting anything. A karma yogi is free from the consequences of the actions. So I'm very free in that place. I have no personal agenda. I am content. I am getting what I need. So now, as I go through the day in that state of really being connected and receiving, again, I'm making choices at every moment. Even what I'm going to say is a choice. So these will be very different if I'm coming in that very, we say, full or pure place, very content.
This aspect of contentment to make decisions from a place reminds me when you were sharing about that individual in a very high standing position in the
Hmm.
military, that he's spending a minute to pause. But when you were sharing that, probably 59 seconds
Hmm.
is really, and that was an example of 59 seconds of the time is really about my own stage, which feels is very connected to contentment, to really be stable in this sense of a very sound connection with yourself.
Hmm.
Um, if that's something that what we don't realize is that I really need to focus on the how in terms of my own sense of contentment. And we don't realize that it's all backwards. We're always trying to make a decision. But inside, that you have certain expectations. You're
Mm.
kind of setting yourself up for a trap.
Yeah, yeah. If I expect the outcome of the decision to make me content, so rather than the contentment coming at the front end, I'm hoping it's at the back end, that I'll make this decision and I'll be content by the outcome of the decision versus I need to be content before I even make the decision. Then yeah, we've put things definitely in the wrong order. So, this, we often say the courage or the trust in spirituality that I really, or we sometimes even use the word surrender, or renunciation, but this idea of constantly training ourselves to live spiritually or live in a pure way. Um, not so much decisions are always based on taking or what am I going to get. I heard recently there was a new upstart organization, I think it's called Shopify. And at this time, small businesses need to go online. So they help businesses in very short time set up an online presence. And, as it was initially talked about, it sounded extremely altruistic and wonderful. They're supporting businesses so they don't go under. And then at the end, they said, I mean, don't be deceived that they're making profit out of this. yes, it's very good what's happening, but they are making profit out of it. So it's so rare in the world to to be so full. I think people are shocked. They say, we sort of say, well, what's in it for me? Like, why are you doing this? What do you get out of this? And the idea that actually I've already got what I need. I don't get anything out of it. So again, taking that time, I, the soul, am in a very peaceful, content state of well being as I go into decision. It's often been said, not specific to Raj Yoga, that one should never make decisions when they're upset or angry or irritated or confused or anxious. It's a very bad state to be making decisions in, and we often do, and they create disaster some point. So, I mean, that wisdom is out there. We're just taking it to a spiritual level.
Then it kind of comes back to this topic and about useful decisions then,
Mm-hmm.
because of not knowing what's meaningful, not seeing those ramifications about what's happening. All this aspect about the law of karma again. But do you feel that, because we were talking about when you were saying that you see some of the situations and some decisions made, and you're like, you know, that's not a good idea.
Mm.
Do you feel that for souls, even though if they're not aware of the aspect of the law of karma, that how much the intention that drives decisions really affect things?
Mhm.
Like, is that only something that's only when you're soul conscious? Is it maybe something that we kind of already know? If the seed of the intention isn't good, it's not going to breed anything that's going to be sustainable.
Mhm. I think even without being engaged consciously in a spiritual study or anything, I think we can sort of get to the point where we can understand that if I make choices or decisions that are not aligned with my core values, that's going to cause a lot of internal conflict, which is what we're really talking about. So, that's the idea again with an organization, for example. They have a mission statement or a vision or core values. And if they make a decision that is not aligned with those, they're going to run into trouble. And I remember being with an organization, and towards my final time with them, this was exactly the issue that we were exploring. And I remember there was one point when the seed of this organization was very pure and quite altruistic, admittedly in a worldly way. And I remember there was one point when they were thinking of holding an event, and just the elements they were going to have in the event seemed so at odd with the seed or the core values of the organization. And so, what we found ourselves as a department often doing now as Raj Yogis, we say, what would Brahma Baba do? In that organization, we would look at the founder of the organization and literally think, what would he do? What would he like? It was his vision. What would he do? And if that decision is not aligned with his core or his vision, then it shouldn't be taken, and it creates incredible internal discomfort when we do that, whether it's organizational or individual. That basic understanding, I think, is there for people. What we start to do, though, because the force of ego and lust is so strong, we start to rationalize the decision. And if one finds themselves rationalizing, then that's usually a sign that my conscience is biting, that I'm not actually comfortable with decision, but I'm trying to rationalize that decision. Well, I had to do it because of, and if there's a lot of expansion going on, then I probably need to stop and check. Is what might be off? Is this not aligned with my core values? Is that why I'm having a bit of a struggle with it? Because when decisions, we call it a clean heart, when decisions are aligned with our core values. In Raj Yoga, the core value is purity. When the decisions are aligned, the soul is at absolute peace inside. There are no thoughts, complete peace.
When you shared, it reminds me, there's a topic I feel that would be very meaningful. It would be the account of time.
Mm.
Just because when you're sharing, to be the last thing before we go in reflection. We are having part two, and that's when we'll perhaps have a discussion about the how to
Mm.
make decisions. The importance of making useful decisions is really important, especially if we're not even realizing that we do have these maybe subtle mistakes or dishonoring
Mhm.
ourselves and not even realizing it. But when you're sharing about, when you go into expansion or rationalization, it feels like a lot of times it's because I don't have time. Trying
Mm.
to cut corners because I don't have time,
Mm.
and so that I can't imagine what kind of implications that causing because of
Mhm.
trying to save time. I think that must be all over the place. Everyone is having that issue.
I always really appreciated in the few times that I went to seniors or daddies about something, and the senior leaders of the organization, they just would always slow everything down. You'd say, okay, well, we have to make this decision. These people are really wanting a decision yesterday. And they'd sort of go, sit and meditate for a while, come back tomorrow. It's like, no, but I need it. Yeah, come back tomorrow. And what they knew, they just understood how things work, and that as you're sitting there kind of making the decision to calm yourself down, you are actually sending, that is a karma, and you're actually impacting drama just by making that decision. And they actually would often say the decision to not do anything immediately is a decision. It's a valid decision. And I know there's been times when it's like I feel pressure from souls. I want this, that now. You should do this, that now. And like, yes, very respectful, but there's such a strong feeling of something isn't, I'm not quite aligned or I'm not quite ready. And it's like, I give myself time. And it's amazing, drama shifts. It wasn't that I did nothing. Something is being done. It's very incognito, and drama will actually shift. So they completely transform the face of decision making. And yeah, to not always feel that pressure of time.
Well, thank you, Judy. Just that last point that you shared, that just to wait and see is
Hmm.
also a decision. I think that
Hmm.
nobody really thinks about that as a decision,
Hmm.
but there's a lot going on underground. Mhm.
So we'll just have a short reflection to conclude. It's a very beautiful practice to withdraw inside, experience the stillness, the peace, the simplicity of the self, I, the soul. This very eternal, timeless experience gives such a sense of well being, of fullness. It's actually all the soul seeks, all any of us seek. It's that deep sense of peace, serenity. And then, if I can hold that state as I begin to come into action, thoughts, words, deeds, coming on to the arena of karma, of making choices from this very peaceful place of well being. Those decisions, those choices will also feel like they support peace and well being. They're helping to maintain the integrity of the self and adding peace to the world and creating spaces of well being for others. Just by being in that state myself, my decision making becomes peaceful. Om Shanti.
So thank you for those for joining. Please save the date for next Tuesday, same time as well, for part two for our discussion, which is really about the how in terms of, again, Raja Yoga, of having that capacity to make these decisions that are really beneficial for yourself and others. And just the last point, I think maybe we'll talk about next week. It's very different from making decisions that are based on desires. I think beneficial can be kind of a loaded term.
Mhm.
So, Judy, if you'd like to let us know about upcoming sessions,
I'll do my
it's like a pop quiz
best.
every time.
Yeah. So we have drop in meditation in English Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. It's also in Hindi on Thursdays. And we also have inner fitness on the Zoom platform, Saturdays 2 to 3. I believe the upcoming one is power. No, flow. The upcoming one is flow. And we have a special workshop in English this coming Saturday, the 23rd. Cannot believe we're at the 23rd of January. This is inner healing or healing within. And that's going to be 12 to 1:30 p.m. on the Zoom platform. So the information is available on our website. So feel free to check in there for all the details on all these events and anything I might have missed. And we look forward to the next time we meet online for spiritual exploration. Om Shanti.